Hello students, the content of this presentation is FP tree algorithm. If you remember, in my last class, I had solved two problems on construction of FP tree and how to obtain frequent patterns from the FP tree. So in this tutorial, we shall see how the algorithm works. So as you can see here, this is the algorithm for FP tree. So what is the input to the algorithm? It's nothing but the transactional database in order to construct the FP tree, and you also need a minimum support in order to obtain frequent patterns from the constructed FP tree. The output of the algorithm is complete set of frequent patterns, and the methodology of the algorithm has two main steps. The first step is with respect to the construction of FP tree, and the second step, what you can see here, is a call to FP growth, which is used to obtain the frequent patterns from the constructed FP tree. So just trying to recall the problem that we had seen in class so that we can understand the algorithm in an easier way. So in my first the example which I had solved for the first FP tree problem which I had solved in the class was based on this transactional database, and how we had gone about the construction of FP tree is that we found out the occurrence of each item in the transactional database, and we arranged these items in the decreasing order of their count in the header table. So what you can see here is a header table. So I2 has a count of 7, I1 and I3 6, I4 and I5 2. So if any item, if any two items or more than one item has same count, then it can be arranged in alphabetical order in the header table. So this is a construction of header table, and how we had gone about construction of FP tree is that we read each transaction in the database, and we had drawn the path in the FP tree in the way it occurs in the header table. For example, here the first transaction is I1, I2, I5, but in the header table it occurs as I2, I1, I5, and therefore the path is drawn as I2, I1, I5 in the FP tree. So since this is the first path, the count with respect to every node will be initialized to 1. Next, we read the second transaction I2, I4. So how it appears in the header table, it is I2, I4. So we draw the path as I2, I4. So I2 is now occurring for the second time. So we just increment the count to 2, and I4 is occurring for the first time. So we make the count as 1. Next, we read I2, I3. So how does that occur in the header table? It is I2, I3. So I2 is already there in the tree, and I3 is occurring for the first time. So I2's count will be incremented to 3, and I3 will be 1. Next is I1, I2, I4. So I1, I2, I4 is occurring as I2, I1, I4. So we have the path I2, I1, and so we follow the same path I2, I1, and I4 is a new path now. So from I1 we draw a new path to I4. So I4 has been occurring for the first time here, so make the count as 1, and here I2 will be 4 and I1 will be incremented to 2. So likewise we go on reading every transaction, and as long as a path does not appear in the FP tree, we introduce it newly to the FP tree by making the count as 1, and if the path already occurs, then we just increment the count of the node because the path is already there in the tree. Now going about the algorithm, The FP tree is constructed using the following steps. First of all, we scan the transactional database in order to find the support counts of the items, and we arrange these items in descending order, and the header table is referred to as L here. Then we go about construction of the FP tree. The root node of the FP tree is taken as null. We go on reading each transaction in the transactional database, and we call these insert tree function, which takes two parameters. One is the list of items which has been arranged in descending order. For example, I1, I2, I5. The first transaction I1, I2, I5 has been arranged as I2, I1, I5 here, I2, I1, I5. So in the algorithm, small p vertical bar capital P will have I2, I1, I5, and T is the tree as of now, which is having a null node, that is a root node. So this list will have the transaction which is arranged in descending order, and the small p always consists of that node which is going to get inserted into the tree. For example, I2, I1, I5, if I take, initially small p will be referring to I2. Once I2 is appended into the tree, small p will next point to I1. Once I1 is appended into the tree, small p will next point to I5. And capital P consists of the remaining list. So as long as the path does not appear in the tree, you insert it into the tree and make the count of those nodes as 1. And if at all the path is already present, then you just increment the count. So that's what it says here. If t has a child n such that n dot item name equal to p dot item name, then increment n's count by 1. Otherwise, you insert the node newly and initialize its count to 1. And then you make a function called fp growth, where you pass the entire tree and a null set. Null set there is nothing but the path which we are going to find it as a frequent path. Now here there are two parts. The first part here says that what if a tree has a single path, and the second part, else part, it says that what if a tree has multiple paths. Now let me consider the first case. What if a tree has only a single path? Now let me imagine my tree had only a single path. Then what do? I start finding the patterns from the bottommost node, because if I start from the bottommost node, I will get the maximal pattern. So I start from the bottommost node. The bottommost node will be marked as beta there as referred in the algorithm, and I can combine it with the sub path, that is the path which is present above beta, and I can consider that path only if its support is more than or equal to the minimum support that is provided to the algorithm. So that path can be considered only if the minimum support, if the support of that path is greater than or equal to the minimum support. But what will be the count of that path or the frequency of that path? For example, if I consider I2, I1, I5, this path is traversed once in order to reach I5, because the count of I5 here is 1. So the frequency, the path is considered only if its count is more than or equal to the minimum support, but the count with respect to the path will be equal to the frequency of the node which is marked as beta. Once I5 is done, I go to the next upper node, that is I1. Now how many times I2 is traversed in order to reach I1? That is 4 times, because the count of I1 is 4. So if it is greater than or equal to minimum support, then I consider the path I2, I4. So this is with respect to the single path. Now what if I have multiple paths? For example, I5 is present through multiple paths. I5 is present through multiple paths, and let me say I4. Let me consider I5 and I4. So I have to consider, or I have to find out the conditional pattern base and the frequent pattern for every item, that is I5 and I4, that is present in the tree. So if I have to do that, then I have to go on finding all the elements that are present in the header table. So what it says is that if at all a tree has got multiple paths, then you have to traverse through every element that is present in the header table, and you can consider that path only if its support is greater than the minimum support, and the count of that path will be equal to the count that is present at the beta node. So if tree has a single path, then for each combination denoted as beta of the nodes in the path, the bottommost node, if you take it as beta, generate pattern beta union alpha. That is, every path that is the path that or the sub path that is present above beta will be considered only if its support is greater than or equal to minimum support, and if its support count is, and its support count will be initialized to the minimum support count of the nodes in the beta. If it has multiple paths, then for every element in the header node, you have to consider the conditional pattern base and the beta's conditional FP tree, and you have to keep on doing it until the tree is null. So that's all with respect to the FP tree algorithm. If you have any doubts with respect to this, you may either mail me or you may contact me over my phone. Thank you so much.